Good to see you.
How'd all these people get in your room?
Every day, I drop a fresh video diving deep into the legends of Hollywood's golden age. If you're into that kind of throwback drama, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, or leave a comment. It really helps and doesn't cost a thing. Thanks for tuning in. Now, let's jump right into the madness. Johnny Carson's Tonight Show was legendary, but not always for the reasons you'd expect. He had guests who could barely remember their own names. Oscar winners who went off script and hurled Johnny's cue cards across the stage like confetti. Some moments were hilarious chaos, while others turned into total live-on-air train wrecks. Let's break down the 10 wildest, most out-of-control drunk guests Johnny Carson ever had sitting across that famous desk. Number 1, Dean Martin. The man was smooth, charming, and quick with a joke, but when he walked out from behind that curtain already holding a drink, you knew the night might go sideways fast. Once he sat down, though, the cracks showed. Dean stumbled over setups, slurred through punchlines, and sometimes greeted Johnny like they'd never met before. At first, the crowd laughed because that's what they were supposed to do.
Good to see you.
How'd all these people get in your room?
You're going to start already, huh?
No, I'm not starting.
How are you?
I'm almost through.
But soon, the energy shifted. What usually looked effortless on Dean's own variety show started to feel shaky under Johnny's tighter format. Johnny, ever the pro, tried to keep things light, tossing Dean simple questions he could have answered half asleep. But Dean wasn't having it. He cut Johnny off mid-sentence, drifted into half-finished stories, or just got up and wandered toward the band like he forgot the cameras were rolling. He mixed up his movie titles, blanked on which film he was supposed to be promoting, and sometimes just stopped talking completely.
Yeah. You weren't on last night.
I certainly was.
You were not. I watched that little girl sing.
What little girl sing?
One of the angels, Cheryl Ladd.
No, you were watching Charlie's... No,
that was Monday night.
That was Monday night.
I wasn't here then.
No, that was Monday night.
They had that Rainier guy from... Oh, no, Bob Reiner.
Rob Reiner.
Rob, yeah.
Huh?
It's close to Rainier, yeah.
Like the thought vanished right out of his head. It was chaotic, wild, and unforgettable. Producers started quietly adjusting the schedule every time Dean Martin's name popped up. They knew his segments could drag on forever, stall mid-sentence, or crash so hard they'd have to cut to a commercial without warning. The old magic still showed up in flashes, that signature charm and swagger, but each appearance felt like a risky coin toss between Dean Martin, the legend, and a man struggling to keep hold of the cool persona that made him famous. Number 2, Ed McMahon. Now, this one caught everyone off guard. Ed wasn't just any guest. He was Johnny's right-hand man, the rock-solid sidekick who never slipped up. But one unforgettable night, everything went sideways when he introduced Joan Emery from the San Diego Zoo. Ed was clearly tipsy, and everyone could see it.
About 9 years.
Right, yeah. Several plus several would be about 9.
You said 7 or 8.
No, no, I didn't say 7 or 8. I said several.
Then you said 7 or 8, and I said
Did
it's
I?
9. Yes.
9. Good, thank you.
Yeah. Some of the animals you had as babies are now 10 years old.
That would be about right.
He got stuck obsessing over how many years Joan had been coming on the show. Was it 7 years, 8, maybe 9? He argued with Johnny about it, insisting he was right, even though he obviously wasn't. Johnny tried to steer things back to normal, but Ed kept drifting off into slurred, half-baked stories about baby lions that made 0 sense.
Remember the animals that did something funny on your tie?
Yes.
Those little lions, the little baby lions, were 1 year old.
That's right.
They are now treacherous and ferocious 10-year-old animals.
Okay. Anyway, Joan Embry is here tonight.
And she's now 32.
That's right.
You could see Johnny's patience thinning as he gently teased Ed about needing a nap, trying to snap him out of it. But Ed was bouncing between defensive and strangely sentimental, almost like he couldn't decide whether to laugh or cry. The chaos didn't stop there. Ed kept cutting off Joan's introduction, jumping in at the wrong times, getting emotional for no reason, and losing track of what he had just said moments earlier. Finally, Johnny stepped in. Enough was enough. He called for Joan to come out fast, just to save what was left of the segment. It was one of those rare Tonight Show moments where the always smooth Ed McMahon looked totally off his game, slurring, rambling, arguing, and leaving Carson scrambling to keep the show from completely unraveling. Number 3, Truman Capote. In 1980, the legendary author showed up on The Tonight Show completely out of it, delivering one of the most painfully awkward interviews the show had ever seen. Capote already had a reputation for showing up in rough shape on other programs, but this night, it was something else. He could barely make it to the guest chair. His steps were slow and unsteady, his feet dragging as he leaned on Johnny's desk for balance before collapsing into the seat. His eyes were glassy, his words slurred, and Johnny greeted him gently, hoping maybe it wouldn't be as bad as it looked. But oh, it was worse. Capote could hardly get a full sentence out.
Well, I've been to bed, but...
to sleep is what I meant.
A number of people.
Can I ask you some serious questions?
Sure, you can go right in.
All right.
I feel perfectly
Have you been
fine.
drinking?
You mean very lately?
You have had a history of alcoholism. Millions of people out there have
my
also had the
God,
same problem.
alcohol isn't the least of it.
Most of what he said came out as a jumble of mumbled words no one could understand. The audience didn't even laugh. They just sat there, frozen in silence, realizing they were watching a legend fall apart right on live TV. This wasn't just any guest. This was Truman Capote, the man who wrote In Cold Blood, one of America's most celebrated authors. Yet here he was, unable to string his thoughts together. When Johnny tried to ask about his latest writing project, Capote suddenly veered off into a rambling story about some fancy party in the Hamptons and somebody's dog. Nobody had a clue what he was talking about. He'd start one sentence, lose track, then jump into another and forget that one too. The whole thing was spiraling. And then came the moment that stunned everyone. Out of nowhere, Capote turned to Ed McMahon and seriously asked if he could sit in his lap. Ed gave a shaky laugh, unsure how to react, while Johnny jumped in fast, trying to save the moment. Capote reached for a glass of water, missed his mouth completely, and spilled it all down his shirt. It was shocking, sad, and impossible to look away. Capote didn't even notice that the entire audience was frozen in silence. This wasn't funny drunk anymore. This was just plain unsettling. After about 7 painfully awkward minutes, Johnny had to step in and cut to an early commercial break. When they came back, he tried to wrap things up in just 2 more minutes before ending the segment completely. Capote slowly shuffled back behind the curtain, and that was the last time he ever appeared on the show. The clip became infamous. A Pulitzer Prize-winning author so far gone he could barely sit upright on national TV. It was one of the most uncomfortable moments The Tonight Show had ever seen. Number 4, Shelley Winters. Now this one, pure unstoppable chaos. Shelley had a reputation for showing up tipsy, but her 1974 appearance was next-level madness from the second she stormed out from behind that curtain. She came out like a hurricane, full of energy and attitude, cutting Johnny off every time he tried to talk. She talked over him, over the other guests, over everyone. There were 2 other people on the couch that night. They might as well not. Every question Johnny tried to ask just bounced right off her. She ignored everything and went off on random tangents about people nobody even knew. Then came the most shocking part. A young actor was there promoting his very first big movie, the biggest night of his career. Shelley turned to him, grabbed his knee tight, and started roasting his film right to his face. She called it boring, said his acting was stiff, and laughed like it was all a joke. The poor guy just sat there frozen, wearing that fake smile people get when they don't know what else to do. Johnny tried to step in and defend the actor, but Shelley wasn't listening to anyone. Then she spotted Johnny's note cards, the ones filled with carefully written questions from the show, and without hesitation, she leaned forward, snatched the entire stack right out of his hands, and threw them behind her over the couch like they were trash. The cards went flying across the floor as the audience gasped out loud. Johnny sat there completely speechless. He'd never had a guest do anything like that before. But Shelley just kept on talking like nothing happened. After about 12 exhausting minutes, Johnny finally gave up, looked right into the camera, and calmly said they were taking an early commercial break. Once the show wrapped, NBC producers made a quiet but firm decision. Shelley Winters was officially blacklisted. NBC made it official. Shelley Winters was done. They told her agent straight up that she wasn't welcome back on The Tonight Show. That ban lasted nearly 3 years. When she finally got the chance to return, the producers made sure to sit her down and have a very serious talk about showing up sober and treating her fellow guests with some respect. Number 5, Orson Welles. The legendary filmmaker behind Citizen Kane wasn't exactly known for moderation, and by the mid-70s, his Tonight Show appearances had become unpredictable events. Orson often drank before hitting the stage, but his 1975 visit, that one was total mayhem wrapped in genius. Backstage, crew members spotted him downing multiple bottles of wine before the show even started. When he finally stepped out under the studio lights, it was clear he was tipsy. But still, Orson Welles, still that booming voice and sharp wit, just slightly off balance. Johnny barely got one question out before Orson launched into a 14-minute non-stop monologue that felt like a wild ride through his entire mind. He started with a deep, fascinating breakdown of Shakespeare. Honestly, it was brilliant. But then he swerved into stories about his own career, bounced to the history of theater, and somehow ended up ranting about a Hungarian director nobody in the audience had ever heard of. Then came the moment everyone still talks about. He began quoting Hamlet, got 3 lines in, forgot the actual text, and just made up brand new Shakespearean lines on the spot. He delivered them with so much confidence that half the audience probably thought they were real. Johnny sat there the whole time, completely drained, glancing at the camera like, I've lost total control of my own show. For 14 straight minutes, Orson never paused once. Not for laughter, not for breath, nothing. It was pure, chaotic brilliance. The crowd couldn't look away because even when he was totally gone, Orson Welles still commanded every second of the room. There was no structure, no rhythm, just Orson on wine, spinning through ideas, memories, and monologues like a one-man tornado on live TV. And despite the madness, Johnny kept inviting him back because when Orson was on, he wasn't just good, he was unforgettable. With some guests, you just never knew which version would show up, calm and charming or wild and unpredictable. Number 6, Oliver Reed. Now, this one's legendary for a totally different reason. Oliver Reed was the only person on this entire list who almost never even made it to the stage because Johnny Carson flat out refused to risk it. Back in 1973, Reed was supposed to appear as a rising movie star. It should have been great TV, right? But behind the scenes, NBC executives were panicking. They had already seen his drunken disasters on other talk shows, and they were ugly. Reed had a habit of threatening to drop his pants live on air, openly insulting hosts, demanding booze mid-interview, and even getting physical when things got out of hand. The execs showed Johnny the tapes, and once he saw them, that was it. Decision made. He pulled the plug before the cameras even started rolling. Oliver Reed never appeared on The Tonight Show during Johnny's entire 30-year run. Afterward, Reed mocked Carson publicly, calling him scared and uptight, but Johnny didn't care. He'd already seen enough chaos over the years. The last thing he needed was another unpredictable explosion happening live in front of millions. If you're enjoying these wild Hollywood moments, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. There's a lot more madness ahead. Now, let's move on to number 7, Peter O'Toole. The brilliant, unpredictable star of Lawrence of Arabia was known for being both a genius and a total handful, depending on the day. And during his 1978 appearance, he managed to be both in the same interview. O'Toole showed up after what witnesses called a very long afternoon of drinking, and you could practically smell the booze when he sat down. Johnny kicked things off by asking about Lawrence of Arabia, but O'Toole completely ignored the question. Instead, he launched into this fiery, passionate lecture about acting techniques.
Friday the 13th is
Today.
today. I wondered why everyone was rather quiet. Yes, we didn't fly today, and I wonder why we didn't fly today, yes.
But didn't you tell me
It's all becoming clear.
that you flew on a helicopter today?
I was in the helicopter today, being bounced up and down by some very nice gentlemen about 3 feet from the ground, but not yesterday.
And for a moment, it was incredible. Pure brilliance. Then, without warning, the spark faded into confusion. His thoughts started unraveling, sentences looping into nonsense before snapping back into flashes of genius again. The back and forth was dizzying. Suddenly, he grabbed Johnny's pen off the desk, held it up like a sword, and challenged Johnny to a fencing match right there on live TV. Johnny tried to keep up laughing through the chaos, but you could tell he was struggling to reel the show back in. It was pure Peter O'Toole. Captivating, chaotic, and impossible to predict. Then O'Toole started spilling wild drinking tales about Richard Harris, the kind of stories that probably shouldn't have aired on TV, but wow, did they land. It was messy and magnetic at the same time. Pure chaos with a wink, and the crowd ate it up. Johnny did too, because even in the storm, Peter O'Toole was still more fascinating than most guests who showed up stone-cold sober. Number 8, Foster Brooks. He was famous for playing the inebriated character. Slurred words, wobbly timing, forgetting names. That was the whole bit, and audiences loved it. But staff later said at least a couple of his Tonight Show spots were juiced by real pre-show drinks, not just acting. He liked a quick sip to get into character, but sometimes he pushed it a little too far. On one particular night, the wheels came off. He slipped out of the polished routine, and the slur stopped being part of the act. It was real. He lost his place, stumbled through lines, and the carefully rehearsed comedy turned into a live tightrope walk you could feel in the room. Johnny clocked it instantly and shifted into rescue mode, smoothing the edges and turning the moment into laughs without exposing Brooks, playing along like it was all scripted magic. Afterward, crew members said it plain. He was playing drunk and also actually drunk. That thin line between performance and reality blurred right there on stage, and the audience watched it happen in real time. Number 9, Robert Blake. He had a handful of tense visits, but one stands out thanks to some heavy backstage drinking that gave him serious liquid courage, according to multiple staffers. He came out confrontational and kept stepping on Johnny's questions while the show was trying to stay on track for the folks at home. Johnny nudged him toward the movie plug, the entire reason actors got booked. But Blake swerved hard into a rant about Hollywood phoniness instead. He basically roasted the industry live on air while promoting his own film, and the energy flipped from chatty to combustible in seconds. It was a total mess. Nothing he said made sense. After that night, Carson pulled his producers aside and made it crystal clear. Never book Robert Blake if he's had even a single drink. It became an unofficial rule. Check with his team first. Make sure he's showing up sober, because a drunk Robert Blake was pure chaos, unpredictable, volatile, and absolutely not worth the risk. What really shocked people, though, was how fast his mood could flip from calm to explosive. When he first came through the curtain, the audience cheered, expecting that trademark tough guy swagger he usually brought to talk shows. But the second he sat down, his whole vibe changed. He started bouncing his leg, tapping his fingers, eyes darting around the room like he was daring someone to cross him. His stare was wild, unfocused, and everyone could feel the tension creeping in. Johnny tried to ease into the interview with a simple, harmless question about Blake's latest project, but Blake wasn't having it. He completely ignored the setup and launched into a random story about his early days as a child actor working on studio backlots. His words came out with this sharp, jittery intensity that made the whole room go quiet. It didn't feel like a story. It felt like a breakdown in progress. Then, out of nowhere, he jumped from the past straight into a tirade about how modern actors never earn their success anymore. The switch was so sudden, the audience didn't even know how to react. Johnny, ever the professional, tried to lighten the tension with a quick joke, but Blake didn't even hear it. He just kept charging forward like a train with no brakes. Every time Carson tried steering the conversation back onto safe ground, Blake veered off again. No warning, no control. 1 second, he was reenacting an intense fight scene from his new movie. The next, he was ranting about agents, producers, and casting directors who, in his words, had no business deciding anyone's future. The mood swung like a pendulum, unpredictable, uncomfortable, and impossible to stop. Johnny shot Ed McMahon that famous raised eyebrow look, the one that silently screamed, "We're losing control here." Ed didn't even try to step in. He just gave a tiny nod like, "Yep, we're in trouble." The audience chuckled nervously at random moments, laughing not because anything was funny, but because they didn't know what else to do. Johnny, ever the pro, kept his trademark smile glued on, trying to play referee, while Blake bounced wildly from one subject to another like a storm with no direction. Then things escalated. Blake suddenly stood up, totally unprompted, waving his arms around while acting out some chaotic story about a director he once worked with. The poor camera operator scrambled to refocus just to keep him in frame. Johnny gently raised his hands, motioning for Blake to sit back down, but it didn't work. Instead, Blake leaned across the desk, looming over Johnny, and launched into another intense rant. This time, it wasn't about anyone specific. It was about the weight of being in Hollywood for decades, the frustration, the pressure, the years of fighting for respect. It wasn't pure anger, though. It was messy, emotional, all over the place. You could tell it wasn't rehearsed. It was raw, unpredictable energy spilling out on live television. Most guests treated The Tonight Show like a privilege, a chance to shine, promote their work, and enjoy the spotlight. But Blake? He treated that couch like a witness stand, arguing for his entire legacy as if the audience were a jury. Backstage, the crew was frozen, whispering about whether they should cut to commercial early. But Johnny hated embarrassing guests that way unless there was absolutely no other option. Instead, he kept trying to steer the chaos back to normal, tossing Blake soft, easy questions about his movie, his director, even small talk about the weather, anything to break the tension. But Blake swatted each one away like an annoyance, circling back to old grudges, bitterness, and half-remembered stories that kept looping back to his anger. You could practically see Johnny thinking in real time, how do I keep this watchable without turning it into a public meltdown? But Blake kept going, unstoppable, steamrolling right through every attempt to calm him down. Finally, Johnny squeezed in a polite wrap-up, thanking him for coming, but Blake wouldn't stop talking, even as Doc Severinson's band started playing the commercial music. Johnny slowly stood, placed a steady hand on Blake's shoulder, and gave him that classic calm smile that clearly said, "We're done here." Without Johnny saying a single word, Blake finally seemed to catch on. The segment was over. As they cut to commercial, the audience gave that awkward half-applause people do when they're not sure whether to laugh or be worried. It wasn't the usual cheerful ending. It was hesitant, uneasy, like the whole room had just watched something they weren't supposed to see. Johnny still flashed that famous smile for the camera, ever the professional, but the second the red light switched off, his expression dropped completely. No jokes with the band, no lighthearted banter, just silence. He walked straight back to his desk, shaking his head slightly as the studio buzzed with confusion. Meanwhile, Blake stayed in his chair, still talking to anyone within earshot. His voice was quieter now, but the tension hadn't left. His body was still charged, his hands still moving as he mumbled about phonies and Hollywood nonsense. A stagehand cautiously stepped forward and whispered for him to head backstage. Blake just shrugged like nothing strange had happened and shuffled off, still muttering under his breath as the audience whispered among themselves. In the control room, panic was immediate. The director and producers started talking over each other. Could they even use the footage for the West Coast feed? Was anything he said legally risky? Did he actually name names on live TV? Someone replayed the segment with the sound muted, just watching the body language. Johnny leaning back in clear discomfort, Ed McMahon staring straight ahead, and pockets of the audience giving that nervous laughter that said everything. You didn't need sound to feel how tense that studio had been. Finally, one of the associate producers broke the silence and said what everyone else was already thinking. We can never let that happen again. Backstage, the mood was ice cold. No one wanted to go near Robert Blake's dressing room. Crew members kept their distance, speaking in low voices, just waiting for the moment he finally left the building. The chaos had ended, but the shock lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling. No one backstage wanted to get trapped in one of Robert Blake's hallway rants. Everyone kept their distance, pretending to stay busy just to avoid him. A few minutes later, Johnny Carson finally walked through, still in his suit, tie slightly loosened, that cool composure just barely holding together. He was polite, because Johnny was always polite, but his tone was sharp enough to cut glass. He thanked Blake for coming, said he appreciated him making the trip, but there was no warmth behind the words. It was all business. The second Blake left the building, Johnny turned to his producer and laid it out plain and simple. Next time, we need to know what we're getting. If he's had anything to drink, we pass. That single comment became official policy within hours. The bookers added a quiet note right beside Blake's name on their contact sheet. Confirm state before arrival. Another line followed. Check with the publicist. If there's even a hint he's been at a bar, reschedule or pass to another show. It wasn't personal. It was survival. Johnny's entire empire thrived on balancing live unpredictability with smooth control. The audience expected fun, not fear, and a guest like Blake could turn that balance upside down in seconds. And as soon as the cameras stopped rolling, you could feel the studio exhale. The tension broke like a snapped wire. One crew member later described it perfectly. It felt like walking out of a room where someone's been yelling, but you weren't allowed to leave. That night, everyone went home a little shaken, realizing just how close the show had come to spiraling completely out of control. Johnny didn't rant or yell afterward. That wasn't his style. Instead, he walked straight up to his producer, calm but unshakably firm. He said Blake was too unpredictable, too emotional, too wild, especially after drinking. And Johnny knew the truth better than anyone. A good talk show host can handle almost anything. Nervous guests, boring ones, even the ones who ramble nonstop. But not someone who turns the stage into their own personal battlefield. For Johnny, keeping control wasn't just part of the job. It was the job. From that night on, there was a standing rule written in stone. Robert Blake's sobriety had to be confirmed before he was ever booked again. If there was even the slightest sign he'd been drinking, the order was simple. Reschedule or cancel the appearance altogether. Everyone agreed. A sober Blake could be sharp, funny, and unpredictable in the best way, but the other version, pure, uncontrollable chaos waiting to explode. And that's what made The Tonight Show such a wild ride during Johnny Carson's 30-year reign. Even on the most perfectly controlled show on television, chaos always found its way in. Carson spent 3 decades mastering the art of live TV survival, keeping the laughs going while juggling some of the most unpredictable personalities Hollywood had ever produced. Some guests Johnny saved with quick wit and a perfectly timed joke. Others he had to cut off mid-interview with an emergency commercial break. And a few, well, he just never invited them back again. But every one of these moments proved the same thing. No matter how polished the stage or how calm the host, live television is never truly under control. Sometimes someone walks through that curtain completely drunk, and all you can do is smile, improvise, and survive the next 7 minutes. And so tell us, which of these guest moments shocked you the most? Were there any other infamous Tonight Show meltdowns we missed? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear your take. And if you want more wild, behind-the-scenes stories from Carson's legendary run, make sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment to keep the Hollywood chaos coming.